The Central Bank of Nigeria has announced that international oil companies can sell 50% balance of the repatriated export proceeds to authorized forex dealers aimed at bolstering liquidity and stabilizing the foreign exchange market. Now, the Apex Bank earlier stopped IOCs operating in Nigeria from immediately remitting 100% of their forex proceeds to their parent company abroad. Now, a 50% recourse has been granted. How well can this latest policy achieve its intended purpose? Femi Oladeyin, partner, Agentil Capital Partners, is joining me from Lagos, West Africa's commercial capital. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hi, thank you. It's absolute pleasure once again.
So before now, IOCs could send all their earned money in foreign currency back to the headquarters abroad. Now, the CBN is requiring and asking that they keep about 50% of this money in Nigeria. What's your take on this?
Look, I mean, this is still the continuation of the policies of the central bank to increase supply into the market. We know that supply has been the biggest constraint, despite all the policies that they've introduced in the last few months. We've still not been able to get supply back to the pre-2015, 2016 levels. And what the central bank is just trying to do is to provide liquidity in the market. And as you would imagine, the IOCs are the biggest exporters of Nigerian crude. And obviously that means that they're the biggest earners of foreign exchange. And what the central bank is trying to do right now is to encourage them to sell some of those dollars into the market, at least 50%. I have my thoughts as to how effective that would be and what exactly the longer term plans of the central bank are.
Well, of course, we understand that the issue is around mitigating volatility, ensuring that, as you have said, there is enough FX liquidity and stabilizing the Nigerian naira. But then when you look at this, Femi, do you think these can be achieved? Because some people feel that this is probably a cosmetic approach. But then when we look at it holistically, most especially even how it affects these IOCs, is it in our best interest to do this?
No, fair question you ask. And I think that it's a double-edged sword, right? So because if you think about it this way, the IOCs today, they have naira expenses as part of their production costs, right? Obviously, so your expectation is that some of the naira proceeds or some of the dollar proceeds that they've had in the past would be converted into naira and used to meet their naira expenditure. Now, the only way this really makes any fundamental difference to the market is if an IOC was spending less than 50% of its revenues on its costs. But if it was spending more than 50%, then it's unlikely that there's anything to remit. Also to remember that what we're really doing isn't solving any long-term problems, because if you think about it this way, the IOCs today pay 85% of their profits as per PPT, in addition to royalties and other expenses and costs that they pay to the federal government, which they pay in FX already anyways. So I honestly think that this is cosmetic, as you said. Whilst it would increase short-term availability of FX in the market, long-term, I don't see it doing a significant dent to the demand issues that we've had in the market for some time. It will improve short-term liquidity, but fundamentally, we still need to encourage the IOCs to invest in the Nigerian market and at least try and get our production back to the 2 million barrels levels that we had a few decades ago. And I think that's a longer-term solution to our problems, not just short-term fixes.
Well, as you've said, some financial experts also say that this will potentially encourage IOCs to reinvest some of their earnings back into Nigeria and also ensure efficient management of their forex needs without unnecessary restrictions. So when you look at this new policy, can we call it a way of incentivizing the activities in the sector?
No, I don't think that would work. Part of the biggest problem the market has had, for example, is it took us 20 years to pass the Petroleum Industry Act. And that in itself meant that the investment decisions that IOCs make, those investment decisions have moved on, right? They've moved on to other markets whilst they were waiting for us to get our acts together. I was talking to an IOC CEO literally just before the score, and he was saying to me that, look, they need to make long-term plans, but in Nigeria it's very difficult because policies change on a regular basis, and that's where the challenge is. So again, there's another policy they have to deal with. The central bank now saying to them that they can only repatriate 50% of their export proceeds, and they have to sell, or they can sell 50% to the local market. Those are disincentives for investment. So as much as we're trying to solve one problem, we're creating a bigger one, which is we're stifling investment in the oil and gas sector. And if you looked at what has happened in the last decade in that sector, the reason why we're struggling with production today is simply because the IOCs have refused to invest in Nigeria. And so all of our policies should actually be driven towards encouraging investment in the market.
Okay, so Femi, there are still other issues as regards what the Central Bank of Nigeria is trying to achieve, and one has to do with who or what comes first, flexibility, eligible transactions and all that. Now, in about a few minutes, let's pick it in bits. How do you think, or how will the prioritization of these Forex sales work? Will the initial 50% for authorized dealers be sold first, or can IOCs choose which portion to sell and when?
So I don't believe that the central bank can legislate and force IOCs to sell their FX. I believe that that's almost illegal. But what the central bank is to encourage them. I believe that what the central bank is also going to try and do is to incentivize the IOCs to participate in this by making it easier for them to take out the remaining 50%. I think if that happens, then there's an incentive for an IOC to put its cash in the market and sell and meet its naira obligations. Now, another big positive for the IOCs is that in the past, we were dealing with a market where the exchange rate was, there was an official exchange rate and now there was a real market exchange rate. The fact that that does not exist anymore in the market gives them further incentives to invest, to obviously sell their dollars for equivalent naira value. However, when you talk about prioritization, I believe that the market itself is already an efficient market because it's a willing buyer, willing seller market. And the central bank has removed all the restrictions that existed prior to now. So I would say that there is a strong possibility that whilst this is positive in the short term, it is unlikely to change prioritizations.
Okay, we might just have to end discussion right here. There are also other issues we may need to look at in terms of transparency, oversight, sustainability, and some other that maybe something we'll get to look at in our discussions to come. But then Femi Oladeyin, partner, Argentile Capital Partners, thank you so much for talking to us.